Approximate DNA contribution in Sinhalese. 1. South Indian, Dravidian. Studies estimate that around 55 to 70% of the Sinhalese genetic makeup is derived from South Indian populations, particularly from Tamil Nadu. This is attributed to geographical proximity, ancient migrations, and historical interactions with South India. 2. North Indian, Indo-Aryan. The North Indian, Indo-Aryan contribution is estimated at around 25 to 35%. This reflects the influence of early Indo-Aryan migrations that introduced the Sinhala language and cultural elements to Sri Lanka. 3. Indigenous, Veda. The indigenous Veda contribution accounts for approximately 5 to 10%, reflecting ancient local ancestry. Key findings. The South Indian contribution to Sinhalese DNA is greater than the North Indian contribution, but the North Indian influence is still significant, distinguishing the Sinhalese from the Sri Lankan Tamils. In comparison, Sri Lankan Tamils have a predominantly South Indian genetic profile with little to no North Indian admixture. Why these proportions? Historical migration patterns. The early settlers of Sri Lanka came from South India, and later Indo-Aryan migrations brought additional North Indian influence. Trade, intermarriage, and cultural exchange further integrated South Indian genetic markers into the Sinhalese population over centuries. Are you saying that South Indian people came first before Indo-Aryan group arrived? Yes, archaeological and genetic evidence suggests that South Indian, Dravidian-related populations were present in Sri Lanka before the arrival of Indo-Aryan groups. Here's the timeline and context. Early settlers and South Indian connection. 1. Prehistoric settlement, 125,000 plus years ago. The earliest inhabitants of Sri Lanka were likely part of the out-of-Africa migration and were similar to South India's ancient populations. These early settlers formed the basis for the indigenous Veda population. Genetic studies indicate deep connections between the Vedas and Dravidian-speaking South Indian populations. 2. Dravidian influence. Before Indo-Aryans, archaeological evidence shows that people from the South Indian region, Tamil Nadu, likely migrated to Sri Lanka during the Neolithic period, around 5000 to 3000 BCE, as part of shared cultural and trade networks. These populations brought agriculture, megalithic culture, and other technologies to Sri Lanka. 1. Indo-Aryan migrations. Circa 500 BCE, the Indo-Aryans likely arrived in Sri Lanka from northern India and introduced the Prakrit language, which later evolved into Sinhala, along with cultural elements such as Buddhism. Genetic studies show that Indo-Aryan migrants contributed North Indian ancestry to the Sinhalese, distinguishing them from the Tamil population. 2. Integration and mixing. Over centuries, the Indo-Aryan settlers intermingled with the existing South Indian descended population and the indigenous Vedas. This mixing created the unique genetic makeup of the Sinhalese, which includes contributions from South Indian, North Indian, and Veda ancestries. Summary. Yes, South Indian-related populations, or their ancestors, were likely present in Sri Lanka before the arrival of Indo-Aryans. The Indo-Aryan migration brought significant cultural and genetic influence, but it built upon an existing population that already had ties to South India. This layered migration history explains the mixed genetic and cultural heritage of Sri Lankans today.